I feel like we view listening as being very passive, but it's really the active part of communication because it's the part that opens the doors. And the difference between a decision and an intention is really, really powerful. I love that you use the word decision. I made the decision. It's like the all in commitment. Like I'm making it happen and I'm doing the thing.
This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and the confidence to be your true self and step into your purpose. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master teacher, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this is not exactly a part 2, but it's another interview with the beautiful Janessa Finley. We had 2 topics that were of equal interest to me, so I decided that we would just do 2 episodes. So we didn't combine them because they are such different topics. So the last one was a lot more scientific, a lot more information to digest, as far as understanding your physical body and what's going on and what you can do to shift your energy from that standpoint. But Janessa also works with, I'm going to say it wrong, the Enneagram. Enneagram. Something like that. She'll say it the right way. I don't know why I can't remember the right way to say it. But it is essentially a personality test, but it is a little different than ones you may have done in the past. If you don't know what it is, she will describe it a lot more in detail. And it is quite accurate on helping you figure out why you are the way you are, and also helping you understand why other people that you interact with are the way they are, which having that understanding is of utmost importance for having harmonious relationships, which I have learned personally, even just from other personality tests and understanding those versions of personalities and how they're described. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope it encourages you to make that decision. You'll hear more about that later. To make that decision to shift your energy and build your confidence. So I won't keep you waiting any longer. Here we go. All right, so we are back once again with Janessa and talking about a completely different but equally as exciting topic. Why don't you start off with what this topic is? Because I'm really excited about it.
Personality. We all have one, and we're also all human. So our personality can work for us, it can work against us. So it's our empowerment to be able to access our strength characteristics from our personality, as much as possible. And so we're going to talk about how to have confidence in communication and how our personality can be leveraged to make that happen with our interactions with others. I really specialize in the connection with ourselves. And when we truly have compassion and understand ourselves and love ourselves, it's just so natural and easy to give that to other people and have really strong relationships. So whether we're feeling physically ill or understanding the personality structure or the unconscious mind, I bring all of that together with the people I work with and really focus on relationships by starting with the relationship with self. So I want to talk about 7 ways that we can increase confidence through communication by understanding or using the Enneagram. And the Enneagram personality system, without getting too deep into it, it's so fantastic and accurate. And I feel as though there's so much information in it. People really could study it for years and years and years if they wanted to go down that rabbit hole. But we want to keep it simple here today But I do want your audience to know and understand that there are 9 main filters or personality types that are mapped out within the Enneagram. So that's one first fundamental thing to know about it. We can understand people's filters fairly accurately just by learning 9 simple ways that people view the world differently. And we also have different energies that fuel us. And those 3 energies are either anger, fear, or shame. So you'll see that coming up with the people that you interact with as well. And that gives you some tips about what their personality structure is comprised of. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. And then the other important thing to just understand as an overview of the Enneagram is that we're able to access the positive types of each of the 9 types. Like, how many times can you use type in a sentence once and have people still understand what you're trying to say? So anyway, as we refine ourselves and work from our place of strength and utilize our energy to really fuel our soul's calling, our purpose in life, that really frees us up to access the strength characteristics of each of the 9 types rather than just sitting in the default programming that's essentially like running on the background in a computer that we don't pay much attention to, we don't have really much awareness of, but it's completely influencing and impacting the way your computer's running. Our personality, when left unattended to, will do the same thing for us. It will completely affect how we're operating, and we're completely oblivious to it, but we don't have to be. So the first way that we can build confidence in our communication with others based upon the Enneagram is simply learning what your Enia type is. And the big key in identifying not only your type, but other people's types as well, is not looking at a person's behaviors, because the behaviors can cross-reference. People will do things with very different reasons. So it's going underneath the behavior and identifying what is the true motivator or fear that that person holds that then creates the behavior to happen. So there's different ways to type yourself, and there are a lot of different online resources that people can access and take the test to see how they type out. Usually I think they're given 2, 3, 4 different types as their most prominent. And I'm not a big proponent of these. I welcome and invite people to use them if they feel called to it. But there's a couple catches about taking a conscious Enneagram test. And the first one is that you're seeing yourself from your conscious perspective of what you know and understand about yourself. And our conscious mind only controls about 10% of what really actually happens. So depending upon how much awareness you have to yourself, and if you see just your positive traits, or are you really honest with yourself about your less positive traits, you may or may not type out accurately on a test that's solely using that cognitive capacity. It is my belief that the Enneagram is imprinted on our soul at the time of conception. And so it's, information stored at that soul level rather than within our brain. And that is why it's important to have other tools to be able to access that information from the soul, because our brain doesn't always naturally do that. So the little shortcut pro tip I love to use for helping people identify their Enia type, or where they center that main type that holds those motivators and fears that are at the core of their being, is using either muscle testing or pendulum. Are you familiar with either of those?
I have a pendulum that I have not used often, but I do have one, and I've tried it a few times. And I think we talked a little bit about muscle testing the last time you were here. Or I should say the first time you were here, because now you've been here 3 times.
So muscle testing is using that physical body muscle response and getting the message from, our innate wisdom And then the brain sends the message through the nervous system, and our muscle holds strong or it goes weak, depending upon if that's true for us. So it's an awesome tool that can reveal so much about ourselves that it takes minutes to muscle test, and it might take a half an hour to do an online test. So coming from my personality of being so super efficient, I am always for sure going to choose the way that's going to get me to from A to B in the most efficient manner. But that also allows us to pull that information that is stored on our soul from our soul, so that we really truly know, and we're not sitting there in that cognitive space wrestling with, is it 8 or is it 4? I see both, which most people actually wouldn't wrestle with those two. It's a bad example, but they're just the numbers that came to mind. So yeah, learn your type first. I learned so much about myself and instantly had so much more compassion for who I was. I learned that things that were really self-irritating to me weren't flaws and faults and imperfections that made me broken or damaged or a result of trauma or something else I needed to fix. The compassion it cultivated within me to say, oh, okay, I see. This is actually, this default programming. And now I have a means and a way that I can refine that and step out of that programming. So I'm not caught in that loop and feeling like you're on a hamster wheel you can't get out of.
That's really interesting, because I recently discovered, when my Reiki teacher looked up my birth chart for me and doing the astrology side of things, like the couple of things that she told me she saw just from that are just innately who I am. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And now I don't feel like, I know I'm still weird, but I don't feel so weird. Because
right.
it's
We're
just
all weird.
Right. This is just who I am. Like, why fight it?
Yeah, 100%. I have been so fascinated, and this is a little off topic, but you bring up astrology. I have not gotten super deep into astrology, but deep enough to satisfy curiosity and to see so much accuracy with that as well. And same with human design. I know a little bit about it, enough about myself to say, wow, this is really accurate as well. It's so cool to see all of these systems that give us a doorway to understanding ourselves and other people. And I'm so curious about how they, can cross-reference each other. There's got to be some other deeper intelligence embedded in all of them. I haven't cracked the code yet, but it's very fascinating to think about. So yeah, and I think that's a valuable point too. I'm all about having all the tools and resources, and I am very loyal to the Enneagram because I have so many tools to help people step outside of that default programming. But there's more than one system out there. So whatever your soul is called to, that's going to support you in becoming the best version of yourself. Seek out that system and use it. It doesn't have to be the Enneagram, but I'll share all the greatness of the Enneagram today.
I love all of them. So
yeah, me too. So the second way that we can increase confidence in communication is just learning the 9 types, learning at least a brief overview of the Enneagram, the 9 filters. So when you're talking with someone, you can understand or identify the filter that they're coming from. How are they seeing the world? And for instance, Carrie, if you are the Enneagram 2 and you're the helper, you're very driven to help. That's why they call it the helper. So you want to help people, and 2s oftentimes make food and take food places or give gifts. They're very warm and nurturing. So if you were having a conversation with an Enneagram 5 who's very intellectual and they're very, very introverted as well, it's not going to land the same if you're talking to them about something and they just dump all this information on you because they know all of the stuff and they've done all the research because they're intellectual, when that doesn't motivate you at all, nor is that one of your core fears. So having this knowledge, you're just going to be like, kind of, okay, thank you. All right. And there's not connection there. And that's when we understand the different filters and the different types. we can meet people where they are and know that the 2 is a very heart-centered personality type. They use their heart to process information. So that comes with feelings and emotions. And so if we were having a conversation about something that maybe you're struggling with, I'm going to immediately jump into that conversation asking you, how does that feel for you? What part of that is the hardest? And really meet you where you are with the way that you process information. And that builds instant rapport. So regardless if you're using this in business, in the relationship with your significant other, with the people at work that you spend the most time around, with coworkers, those dynamics are instantly going to shift in communication when we're not pushing the way we view the world on someone else and we're meeting them in their filter and their perspective of the world.
That resonates so much because this isn't obviously as detailed as the Enneagram. I feel like I say it the wrong way all the time. Enneagram,
you got it.
Enneagram.
Yep.
It's not as detailed as that. But there was a book I read many years ago called Personality Plus, and it went over 4 different personality types. And from reading that and then being able to identify people that I knew who fell into these categories, in addition to learning what I was, and apparently, according to the book, the split that I have doesn't exist, but hi, I'm right here.
Magic unicorn.
But understanding both how I process information, where I'm coming from when I say or do something, and then how someone else with a different personality type that could be considered maybe abrasive or something compared to where I might, the way I might say something versus how they might say something. It really helped me take a step back and be able to not take things personally, because that was one of my things, my personality. I take things personally. I have a tendency to lean that way. And with one of the other personalities, understanding that their motivation is just kind of like what you were just saying with the intellectual, like with that conversation. This other personality is very, I have the answers. I'm telling you what to do. This is going to solve your problem. Here, just do it. And it's kind of the same thing where like they just want to help you, but they're like a little more demanding about it just because they know in their mind, they know they have the answers. So why aren't you doing it? And realizing that they don't mean anything by that. They're legitimately trying to help. That's just how they're coming at it from. I don't know. I'm tripping over my words, but that's where they're coming from and how it's being expressed through them versus how I would be a little more gentle about it and not so pushy, if that makes sense. But that really helped me understand and, like I said, not take things so personally and just kind of be able to have better interactions with people as a result of understanding where everyone's coming from.
Those are super valuable points. And that for sure, to not taking things personally, where I think we're kind of close on the Enneagram, so we might share that trait. But that has been a huge freedom I've gained from coming to understand the Enneagram as well. I stopped taking things personally, like there was something wrong with me, that people were living life the way that they were designed to live life. Why take that personally? But I did. And that's a huge burden. So the next tip that I have for building confidence in communication is really listening to what other people say. I know this can sound so simplistic. Like, of course we listen in conversation, but really truly listen, because the Enneagram has mapped out the 3 ways that people process information. Exactly what we were just talking about: the intellectual through the head, the rational, logical people who are going to think their way through things, the heart center, that heart intelligence, of course, so feeling their way through. And then the gut points that use their gut, the intuition, if it feels right, not from an emotional standpoint, but the feeling versus the emotions. And so you're going to hear people say things like, it feels off. Well, that's just not logical. I'm a bleeding heart. And even within those 3 statements, you'll instantly know that there's either a head point there is a heart point, or there is a gut point. So they're telling you how they process information, and you can pick it up within a matter of 2 minutes of talking to someone because of the way language is used by every single human to express how they view the world, how they process information. So, truly listening to what people say can help you quickly identify their view of the world, their processing, and the angle at which they approach life in general. And then the fourth tip is really along the same lines, which is feel into their energy for those who are feelers. So this is not going to work quite as well for those 5, 6, and 7s on the Enneagram who are our head points. But as I mentioned when we very first started talking, the fear, the shame, and the anger. So those three emotions are prominent for the head, the gut, and the heart points as well. And so if you are really intuitive in nature or in tune to the energies and emotions that people exude, you're going to be able to feel into those three energies that people will function from and which one is predominant for them. When you get into knowing the Enneagram better, or more detailed, I should say, you're also going to be able to feel into the force underneath someone's Enneagram, or the gentleness. So, like, the two, I would say, in my opinion, is one of the most gentle, warm energies within the Enneagram. The four is not too far behind that in a lot of ways as well. The eights are super forceful. The ones are not too far behind them. And the sevens are not so far behind the ones. So if you notice that there's a lot of force, then you immediately will start having little spidey senses go off of, okay, I know that this is maybe an 8, a 1, or a 7. And then you start listening for that language. It's not logical. Okay, this is a 7, they're a head point. You just start putting the pieces together, and it just gives you so much information about the person. And when you know the system, if people will tell me I'm psychic. Well, I'm not really, not really in that way. Am I psychic? I'm actually just using a system that is unfortunately awfully predictable about human behavior.
That's really funny because when I read that personality book, I lent it to my hairdresser because I was telling her about it and she was really interested in it. And she's actually that other personality type I was talking about, where it's like, I have the answer here, just do it. But she read that book and she's like, you've completely ruined me, because now all I'm doing is researching all this stuff. And then all of her other clients, she said she'd be talking with them and they'd be, your hairdresser is your therapist. So they're telling all their problems that they're having with different people. And she would interject like, well, does he do this? Does he say this? And they'd be like, oh, how did you know? Well, yeah, when you understand
100%.
all of this, it makes it, yeah.
Yes, it becomes very predictable. And with that predictability, then is the choice of, well, do I want to put diesel in an unleaded engine and expect it to really run for me? Or should I go ahead and put the unleaded fuel in the unleaded engine and really have that, connection and have it work the way it's designed to?
I have one more interjection, if you don't mind. That might seem a little random, but it's just things are tying together for me. I have recently, from a couple different places, been coming across like what the different frequencies are of different emotions, and how like guilt and shame and all of those are way at the bottom, and then love and joy are the ones way at the top. And at the same time, I happened to hear from somebody else that apparently the average person vibrates around this certain frequency where guilt and shame and fear and all of that tend to hang out. And my first reaction was like, we're just kind of naturally there. Like, what the? Because obviously you want to try to get above that, but that just makes so much sense when you said that's where we're kind of operating from in figuring out who we are and why we act the way we do. It's tying a lot of stuff together for me. So It makes sense now, saying that we're kind of like starting out at that frequency.
That does make a lot of sense. I have read Power versus Force, and I don't know if that's one of the books you have read, but it
I have
has
not.
the chart. with
Yeah.
the frequencies and stuff. So a lot of the same material that you're talking about. And I had never really thought about that. I think that's a very intriguing and valid point that you're making, because for us to stay in what the Enneagram refers to as like the high side of our personality, um, it does take some work, especially when we're triggered or we have emotions. So, yes, coming from that place of average, of the fear and the shame, that yes, anger is in there pretty close as
Yeah.
well, makes a lot of sense that that's our default starting point. And then how much can we shift and grow to shed? It's really that unlearning and letting go of process
Oh my
that
God.
isn't our true being.
Yeah.
And then we can move our average vibrational point on up the chart.
I
Yeah,
feel like
that's
there's so much unlearning required to be able to
oh,
move forward.
I know. Our school system should maybe be called unlearning versus learning. We'd be living in a whole different world. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a beautiful process of life, but process nonetheless. So, my next tip on the confidence and communication also is going to be a point where people might be like, duh, Janessa, but I'm saying it anyway. And it's ask questions. Ask questions. Step out of your own default programming. Because when we jump in to offer advice or to explain an experience we've had and we're trying to build rapport that way, we often will miss the mark, because how we view the world isn't the way they view the world. And we make assumptions. We fill in that gap in our brain with the biases that we hold, and we don't truly understand them. And then there's that gap within also the conversation, the relationship with that other individual. When we stop and take the time to ask questions, we're allowing them to tell us, what does the scene look like to them? Because it's going to look very different than this, how that scene looks to us from where we stand. And in order to really meet people where they are, we need to understand, what does that scene look like to you? Is the grass green? Is it kind of in a drought? Is it dying a little bit? Are you in a barren desert? Tell me more. So asking questions, so simple. And I know that's a communication tip really far outside the Enneagram as well. It's, I think, in all communication tips, but asking questions is super invaluable to really being able to have healthy and harmonious conversations with other people that become resolution focused versus stuck in that, but let me prove my point.
Yeah. Also interesting, because I was listening to another podcast earlier this week, and it was about communication, and that very point was brought up, that you're not necessarily going to be building that rapport the way we think we are when we share, like, even it's just like, oh yeah, I've had that experience too, and you launch into your story after that person finishes, when instead you could have maybe asked a few more questions and dug in a little deeper and maybe gotten a little bit more into the empathetic side of things and understanding more about their story and them, and versus making it suddenly flip and be about you.
Yes. And when we ask questions, it goes back to the previous point, as well as being able to listen to what other people are saying. So you're gaining more information about them. When you're the one doing the talking, you certainly aren't listening. So you're not being able to collect any more information, and you're shutting off your ability to understand or even know where to meet that person. The more information that you get, the more you then have to truly offer the person. So it's within, I feel like we view listening as being very passive, but it's really the active part of communication, because it's the part that
Yeah.
opens the doors.
I think that is the quote that's going to open the podcast episode.
So, the sixth point that I have, or tip, is that our personality is not permanent.
Yay.
Yay is right. Until I was introduced to the Enneagram, I just thought my personality was the way I was born. And in fact, when I was first introduced to the Enneagram, I was really resistant to it, because I thought people used it as an excuse to explain why they were the way they were.
Sure.
And there's just nothing we can do about it. And with my personality, I strive to be a little bit better every day. And if we're just conceding to not being able to do anything about something, then that's really a disempowered place. And it makes me twitch because of my personality. So I was really, really resistant to the Enneagram when I was first introduced to it, which is funny. And I've actually had a couple other people mention that to me, like, no, I don't think I want to get to know the Enneagram, because when I hear people talk about it, they just really are explaining to me why they don't need to do anything for themselves to make life easier. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. I held that perspective and then I shifted it. So we are just one mindset shift away from being able to refine our personality as well. Shifting that energy, those thoughts that create the feelings, that create the behaviors, to step out of the loop. Step off the hamster cage. It's not permanent. And then, like I said earlier, that too allows us to really embody the strengths of all of the types. And so we're moving up on that vibrational chart. We have so many more resources available to us. So the last tip that I have is to integrate the use of the Enneagram into all of your close relationships, intimate relationships, looking at specifically what weaknesses and strengths each type has. And then from that, you can predict, because we're so predictable, you're going to be able to predict the places where there's going to be a lot of harmony, where you're going to work really well together, where those challenges are going to be. And so it gives you a much better launching point for when conflict arises, of knowing where it's really truly stemming to, getting to the pain underneath the pain, to the root of the problem. Like, for instance, who gets control of the remote? Well, depending upon if it's personality related or not, there's going to be certain types that it's going to be all about the freedom. The freedom to have what they want when they want. It's not really about the control. So yeah, you can see which battle is worth choosing. You can show up differently for your partner. And I can't even begin to convey how much my personal relationship shifted when the two of us learned each other's traits, because we are pretty opposite in a lot of ways. But because of the complexity of the Enneagram, I take on his characteristics in times of growth. And so I become very free flowing and very adventurous and spontaneous, which is not my standard daily routine of having a routine and working from a list and doing all my work before I play. And when he gets stressed out, he takes on my characteristics that aren't super sexy that we all have and becomes a little more nitpicky, more judgy, critical. Those things start showing up. And so once you start recognizing those traits instead of reacting to them, we understand where they're coming from, and we can show up for our partner and help lighten the mood, help see that, okay, you're stressed. What can I do to support that? Rather than being like, man, quit being so critical of me. Leave me alone.
Well, that's interesting too, because one of my first thoughts was like, okay, well, what if your partner isn't into or doesn't want to learn anything about it? I feel like from my personal experience, just with learning more about myself and then intentionally shifting my energy and trying to be a little bit more understanding of where he might be operating from, that just me doing that, like when they say like, you're having relationship problems, work on yourself first. We're like, well, what does that mean? But if you do that work to understand yourself first, and then you make that intentional shift in your energy, it can have pretty much immediate effects in a positive way. Like, it was weird when I made just that decision to make a shift, like things changed that same day. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And the difference between a decision and an intention is really, really powerful. I love that you use the word decision. I made the decision. It's like the all in commitment. Like, I'm making it happen and I'm doing the thing. I feel as though a lot of us, I hold intentions too. I think intentions are great, but when I really want something to happen, I'm going to decide.
Yeah.
The intention is kind of like trying. It's well intended. It's a hope and a wish and a prayer. But when we decide, things really truly shift. And you said it so well. When we do the work within ourselves, that ripple effect around us,
Mm-hmm.
it shifts things for the household, for the relationship. It's not just only our own personal growth. The other valuable thing when there is resistance to someone not necessarily wanting to actively learn, giving them little bits and pieces at a time will establish that buy-in, because when they start seeing how accurate it is and it's very helpful, it makes their life easier. Like, who doesn't want an easy button? We all want an easy button. So it doesn't have to be all or none. We don't have to jump into into the ocean or into the deep end all at once. We can just start little tidbits and just explain, oh, well, that's part of my personality. It's the way I'm defaulted. Or, hey, did you know that that's your natural response as well?
Mm-hmm.
Can be very enlightening. And that seems really simple, but there were a lot of things about both myself, my partner, I mean, everyone that I've worked through coaching with the Enneagram with, that they didn't realize it really actually was part of their personality. So it seems so simple because we recognize the things in other people, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't always recognize them in ourselves because we all have blinders.
Yeah.
So,
That's kind of funny too, because going back to that 4 personality thing that I read about years ago, when my husband and I were going to be getting married and was required to go do this, it was just like a 1-day retreat thing. And one of the, I guess you'd call it a lecture that we went to, was about personalities. And we had to take a test. And they didn't have exactly the same names, but I'm like, okay, these are pretty much the same 4 personalities. And before we took the test, I looked at my husband and I said, you're this one and you're this one. He's like, no, I'm not. Because I explained what each personality was a little bit before we took the test. So when I told him the 2 that he was, he's like, no, I'm not. And then he took the test and he tallied everything up and he was exactly those 2. And he's like, oh.
I love that example.
I don't know why that
because
makes me crack up so much, but I was like, I told you.
Exactly. It's so true because you see it in other people in the way they can't see it themselves. And I love this example because it speaks to my exact point about whether you want to use the conscious online test versus tapping into your energy within your being and body. Because your husband, he couldn't see it for himself. He's like, nope, that's not me.
Yep.
Until you got to the end result. And then it's just undeniable.
Well, this has been so interesting. I love learning all about this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of grateful that you verified that I'm a 2, because I've always wondered, like, I resonate with a lot of the description that I remember reading about it. But at the same time, I'm like, am I? I don't know. So thank you for that confirmation.
You're welcome. Yeah, the 2s need to be needed to feel loved. That's their main driving
And I say
principle.
that a lot, exactly what you said about I just want to help people. Like, I've said that so many times, even on the podcast. Like, that's all I want to do is help people. So there you go.
Yeah.
So why don't you let everyone know how they can find you, connect with you, if they want to touch on this aspect of your work?
Yeah, they can visit my website, www.fiercelyradiantsoul.com, and they can find the coaching community option there. And they can also reach out to me if they're interested in just diving into my Enneagram course to be able to learn more about the whole system of the Enneagram in more detail. And then also, I'll share with you so you have it in your show notes. I have an upcoming free workshop where they can jump in there and I will help them type themselves.
Oh, nice.
So they can know accurately what Enneagram type they are and can start researching what that specifically means for them and how that shows up in their, daily life and being.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I have loved both of the conversations that we've had. So thank you so much for coming back and talking about all of this with us.
Thank you so much for having me. The conversation's always great, and it's always a very fun time to get to sit down and chat with you.
That was so fun. I am so fascinated by anything personality related. And it's so nice to have that confirmation that what I have been typed as through these tests is actually accurate. So that's very helpful in helping me do some further research on that. So that said, all of the ways that Janessa mentioned to contact her, getting into that free workshop, all of that will be listed in the show notes, so you can find that information there. Once again, I would love to invite you to come do the Akashic Records money healing sessions with me. It is a 4-part series meant to help you shift your money mindset. We go through the entire timeline of your soul. We don't hit every point, but we go through and find a past life experience. We go into your childhood. We talk about the present, and we move into aligning you with your future success. And these sessions are, in my opinion, amazing and quite powerful. So you'll find the link for those in the show notes as well. And of course, there is always the regular one-on-one Reiki sessions for the energetic healing. We can address pretty much any issue that you would like to focus on, as well as the individual Akashic Records sessions as well, which have many options. You can take a look at all of those on the website. Please make sure that you hop inside the Energy Within Facebook group and follow me on Instagram. And if you feel so called, because I haven't asked in a while, please go ahead and maybe rate and review the show. Those types of things, in addition to sharing it on social media, the ratings and reviews help to boost it. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a positive rating and positive review. Thank you. And that's where I'll leave it. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.
Daddy.
Okay, dude. Okay. All right, go on.
Daddy. Oh, Daddy. Oh, no.
Okay, go on, JJ. Okay, I think we're good.